everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. The airsoft season is soon going to start up here again in Newfoundland. So today, Pat and I thought we'd spend a bit of time talking about our sort of pre-season maintenance and gear checks and all the things that we do sort of in the lead up to the airsoft season. And if you're anything like us, your airsoft gear has likely sat on a shelf or in a closet for the past few months. So before you haul it out and go to your first game, there's a few things that you may want to think about doing to make sure everything is in ship shape. With probably the exception, not necessarily the exception, but in my case, at least, my rifle has been out because I've been doing ready ups, but I certainly haven't fired it in, I'm going to say 4 months or so. So there's a few things that typically we like to go through, and we thought we'd talk about that a little bit and talk about just sort of the lead up and the anticipation to the season. Because I know for me, I'm really, really excited about getting back to the airsoft field. It's something that I really missed over the winter. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened since the season ended. Like I've moved house and a whole bunch of other life stuff that's occurred since then. And it's really driven home the point to me about like how much enjoyment it brings to me and how much of a fun release it is for me to get out and play airsoft. So it's something that I've missed. And here in Newfoundland, especially this year, we've had a relatively mild winter. Actually, we've had long periods where we had no snow on the ground. That really makes you want to get back on the airsoft field, but the outdoor field wasn't really in operation, so nobody was really getting out there, and it was still cold.
And it has some ice-related issues, shall we say?
Well, yes, and for sure, yeah, and there's no question. So it really wasn't feasible for us to get out there, nor would I have really wanted to for the 6 people who are gonna show up for a game in the dead of winter. But still, now that temperatures are sort of slightly warming up, and April's about to hit, we're really, we're thinking about, okay, well, when can we have our first game of the season, right? And I'm just really excited to get it back out there, man.
Yeah, me too. I, as we talked about, I haven't gotten enough trigger time on some of the newer pieces of my projects. At the end of last season, I sort of finished up what I wanted the HPA build to look like, but I haven't really gotten a ton of games in using that setup yet. So it's not dialed in as much as I would like to. In particular, I haven't gotten to use the magnified optic that I purchased very much at all. So, this is the drawback to buying things in the fall as you go into sort of the end of the season. But, so I'm really stoked for that stuff. The talking about this before we started up, has prompted me to go, where are my airsoft socks? Because my hiking socks don't get a whole lot of use during the winter. Like the large fuzzy animal I am, I hibernate. I read as I do not like the cold and I am not going for a hike in it.
Yeah.
So where do I start, when prepping for my airsoft season is sort of firstly pull everything out and see where it all is. And,
totally.
What was broken at the end of last season that I've forgotten about is always a important question. And so far I'm doing pretty well there. I don't think I have anything that's not working right. Although I need to do some maintenance on most of my guns. The pistols need to be cleaned and lubed, and that's just a matter of they've been sitting in a case for 4 months. So,
yeah.
It's
not just
practice.
broken. And it's not just broken too. You need to be looking at stuff that's worn, or that you a good example for me is either socks or gloves I found too, where they were getting holes in them towards the end of last season, and like I didn't really bother. I was like, well, I can get another couple weeks, I can get another month out of these socks or whatever. But like now the new season's picking up again, and I totally forgot that I had a pair of socks with holes in them, or that holes were forming. So now's the time for me to start like, okay, well, I got to order a new pair, or hit up one of the local outfitting stores or whatever to get a decent pair of socks for the upcoming season, right?
I got a couple of pleasant surprises when I started looking for stuff like that. My gloves were, as I'm sure you remember, a little on the airy side. It's not
Yeah.
not much glove left.
Yeah, definitely.
And I had ordered a pair of mechanics ones to replace them towards the end of last season, and they're in with my kit. I'd never used them because they arrived in like November when I ordered them in I think, August.
Yeah.
But that's global shipping crisis for you. So that was sort of like, oh, cool. That's sort of like Christmas. I opened a box of things, and because I don't have a memory, I'd forgotten what was in there.
Yeah.
So I've got a decent set of stuff going on there. So I've got new BDU pants, as we've talked about previously. I have a $5, woodland anorak, like rain shell that is, I don't really know why I got it for $5. I guess that there's not that much market for one size to fit a Yeti. But like it's very serviceable. So I have, a good set of comfortable camo for the season, which is nice to know, especially for the season start, because spring here, for any of our listeners who aren't in Newfoundland, is wet and cold. So having a hard shell that you can toss on over a sweater is a fantastic just piece of kit to have.
Like there's going to be lots of games we're going to be playing. It's going to be like, maybe drizzly. We're certainly, I mean, typically we don't play in the rain anymore. Like we've moved past that for ourselves. But like typically it might be drizzly or on and off, and it'll be like 8 degrees Celsius, right? So if you get wet, we've talked about this before. Like if you get wet, it gets real uncomfortable and gets real cold real quick. So you want to make sure that you have sort of those outer shells that you can throw on to keep yourself warm. And I normally, I have pants as well as like over pants and over like an overcoat that are waterproof, specifically for that purpose. They're woodland, because I really don't like getting wet when it's cold, because it's really just not comfortable, right? You get so cold so fast.
And like very pleasantly, we've come to the point where we've realized that it's not that expensive to be comfortable and airsoft in like damp weather, and we live in a place where there's always damp weather. So
totally, and especially for like good hiking gear. Like it's funny, my wife and I actually went out and bought her like a good pair of hiking boots, because we plan to do a lot more hiking this year.
I mean, your new place is well positioned for it, so hey.
Yeah, for sure. And so like we were looking at new hiking boots, and it's like $250 for a pair of hiking boots, and that on the face of it seems expensive, but like and I remember Jason Fong is the one who introduced me to the saying, but like buy once, cry once, right? So you're spending that money up front, but really it'll last you a really long time. And when you think about especially airsoft comfort items, like not your gear and not your BDUs that are like rubbing up against cover, but like your base layers that really don't get exposed to a whole lot of, let's say, damage typically, how long is that going to last you if you're playing 12 games a year, 15 games a year, 20 games a year? Like that's not a lot of wear. Right? So if you're spending $40 on a pair of like Smartwool socks, say, for example, those socks will last you a very long time if you're only using them when you play airsoft. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I mean, my sort of add on to that is like I bought a pair of good hiking boots, not this winter, last winter, to serve as my winter boots, and then gamed them all of last season and used them when I went hiking last summer. And they've been my winter boots for all of this winter so far, really, and they're comfortable enough and light enough that I just wear them around work. Like I don't switch to, sneakers or dress shoes when I get to school, because school's frankly wet most of the winter anyway. Yeah. Like best efforts of our janitorial staff notwithstanding. It's just, 1,000 people tracking a lot of snow, carry on. And they're none the worse for wear. Like they're definitely going to be good for the rest of this season and probably next winter and likely the season after that. A good pair of hiking boots is relatively hard to destroy. That's kind of the point of them. Mm-hmm. Obviously ankle support and all those good things too, but they're a durable kind of footwear. So I don't mind spending the money on them. It's the, if any of our, I don't know if any of our listeners are into Discworld, but it's the Sam Vimes principle, right? You can buy 10 $5 pairs of boots or one $40 pair of boots. Mm-hmm. Like the cheap ones are cheap for a reason.
Yeah, and at the start of the season is the best time to really start doing some of that investigation slash math to figure out where you need to be spending your money. That you can take stock of, and what I would recommend that a lot of players do, and if you do have a break, yeah, like we do, sort of take inventory of like what it is that your kit looks like. And at the end of this week, actually, we have a new video coming out where I'm going to be overviewing my kit for the year for 2022. And like that's part of my quote unquote like normal process, not making the video, but putting on all of my kit that I plan to wear for this season and just making sure that everything is still doing what it's supposed to. Like, is my helmet still in good condition? Is the stuff that I don't wear all the time, like where are my socks? Where is my belt? What are my trousers? Do they fit well? Do my knee pads still work? Like all of that stuff. You take that.
Did I remember to wash my BDUs before I tossed them in a box at the end of last season?
Yeah, like absolutely. I think that's that. I mean, we talk about that in a second, but like you do that assessment and you figure out like, okay, what is it that needs to be replaced? What am I looking forward to replacing? What do I kind of maybe I want and I'm going to replace later on in the season, but just doing all that mental math. And yeah, to your point just now, absolutely looking at, okay, so what of my stuff is clean? Right. And BDUs is one thing because lots of people choose not to wash their BDUs every single time in order to like preserve the coloration, which I can kind of understand, but also like gross.
I mean, Phil likes to play in the mud a lot.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. I sweat, dude. Like I'm running around, I sweat. I expect that most normal humans tend to sweat as well. So if you're sweating in your clothes, you need to wash them. Right.
I mean,
like,
I wash my gear. Like my BDU gets washed basically after every game.
Me too.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm occasionally lazy and do it every 2 for like the pants if I haven't like fell face first into or taken a knee in the mud. But, you know, certainly whatever like I'm wearing on my upper body absolutely needs to be washed after an airsoft game.
Yeah. And there's stuff in my airsoft bag, and I'm, I'm just a little ashamed to admit, I'm going to say it anyway, but like I have a Shima in my bag that I hauled out the other day and I had not washed since the last game. And it did not smell fresh, let's say. So like, wash your stuff. Like like, really, guys, like come on. But at the start of like you're gonna unpack if you had any stuff that was packed, especially in my case, like I mentioned it before, I moved house, and the best way for me to move my airsoft stuff was to pack it like I was packing it for a game, right? So just pack it in a bag or whatever. And when it got to the new place, I didn't really unpack it. Right? Like, let's be honest, like it's still sort of, well, it's not anymore, but up until like last week or whatever, it was just sort of sitting there. So yeah, does not smell great. And it's not just your BDUs and it's not just your Shima, but like even your Cordura. I mean, it gets dirty. You should scrub that, right? Just like brush it, make sure it's clean. So that's certainly part of the preseason rituals.
Take it out, right? Air it out, brush it off.
Exactly.
Shake the collection of pine needles that certainly are in mine after every season. We live in
paintball scum coming off, like
God, yeah, totally,
like
right?
The cover that we're taking, just hang it up to dry, air it out a bit. Like it certainly can't hurt, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And like it also again, it gives you a chance to check. Oh, like especially if you're using cheaper pouches, which we know. I mean, we do use like all of our admin pouches, or at least all of my admin bits and pieces are still, Malord's cheapest repro, right? Sure. Like, did this come from Wish? Yeah, I think so, right? Like, so make sure that you haven't, torn the $2 zipper out of those or anything terrible, because it happens. So I know, in terms of taking inventory of my kit and like things I want to have that I don't, or things that could be improved. So we've talked a bunch over the winter about the fact that, really Phil and I have been kind of, I would almost say negligent in terms of like our approach to Face Pro over the years versus like the value of our teeth. And like,
negligent is a strong word, but okay, I'll allow it. Continue.
He says that I didn't have dental insurance for 10 years and spent the last 2 paying for that. But so I'm looking at some better options for Face Pro. One of the folks in the Discord has linked me to a Boba Fett helmet that he says will fit my gigantic skull, and that does tempt a little. But more sensibly, like the Face Pro that you picked up there that I think one of our listeners sent to you.
Yes, yes, Shane sent that in.
That seems like a great idea. Or even just like picking up a mouthguard to add to the Shima, maybe. Which is affordable and pretty easy. Probably the most expensive thing on my immediate kit list, if I leave out, doing mad things to guns, which, I shouldn't leave out because I'm me, but hey, is a mesh dump pouch like the one you're running.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time not really liking the Cordura, quote unquote foldable dump pouch that I've had since I started playing. Like, I'm pretty sure it came with my Cyrus.
It's quite likely, yeah.
It's actually really awkward to use. It's never been like a good, comfortable piece of kit that I've liked. I think I have basically like zero positive interactions with it. It's just sort of bare adequacy. And at this point, like, why am I still using something that I can afford to replace that doesn't do its job well when the rest of my kit has been sort of polished up in terms of working quality? Plus, as we've, or as you mentioned last time, we have both started using some slightly more expensive mags, right? So I kind of want to be actually using my dump pouch most of the time when I'm reloading. At least if it's, like I'll toss mags on the ground if I really need to, if I'm in a hurry, but like if I'm doing, admin reloads, or even if I have time when I'm not, stashing it in the dump pouch seems like a better idea relative to like losing a $30 or $40 mag. And again, the one I have is not very good.
Yeah, totally. I think you just raised a really good point. Like, if you have pieces on your kit that you don't enjoy and you can afford to replace them, it's definitely something to do. And I talk about it in the video that we're going to release on Friday. But like, I never liked those typical Cordura dump pouches that we see, so I never used one. Right? I thought they were cumbersome. They flopped around. I'm pretty sure that in the video, I think it might even be Stefan, and he's like running around and you can see it flop around. I'm like, man, I hate that. And it's personal choice, whatever. But I ended up using for a while like a very minimalistic pouch that was just basically like a very resilient fiber, and it folded up and like bunched up into the little pocket that I had on my belt, and that was fine, except it really only held like 2 mags, which is not great if you're going through, like me, you're going through like 5-6 mags a game or something like that. So anyways, Johnny's using that now, and I moved on to that magnet dump pouch, the HSGI ones. So hopefully that works out for you. But again, like, this is a really good time for us in particular to start looking at those things, because by the time, like, let's say we order it in the next couple of days, next couple of weeks, by the time it gets here, like, we'll be hitting like the stride of our main season, and that's when we're going to want that stuff, right? So for us, it makes a lot of sense timing wise to get into this kit. The other thing that happens, and I'm sure it might have happened to some of our listeners as well, is you get stuff over the holiday season. Right? You would get some people gift you stuff, or you decide to just gift yourself some stuff, or you get gifted some money and you decide to invest on your airsoft kit, however that plays out. So I know for me, well, yeah. And so I know for me, like, I picked up a Runcam 4K, which I'm really looking forward to, because it's going to change the way that we present some of our videos to you guys on our, well, not on the podcast clearly, but on our YouTube channel, which is something I'm really excited about. Being able to get more angles of the games, being able to see where the BBs are going, like that kind of stuff is going to be pretty helpful, and hopefully will make for better content. And that's not something I've had a chance to play around on the field yet. I know I've had Chris laser cut me some protectors, some Lexan protectors, so that I can just put them in place, and I've measured it with a caliper, so it's exactly the right size, all that stuff, which is great. But yeah, so I'm really excited about that. And I'm also really excited, like you were mentioning, about that Face Pro. I have never used it. I've worn it, and I've done my ready ups and all that stuff, and it's fine. So I'm excited to see like how it impacts my performance on the field, because I think it really is going to make a difference for me.
Yeah, and that is a significant benefit, right? Talking about, tech work and stuff leading into the season, because I know people are waiting for that just because it's inevitable, right? So I'm going to take apart the HPA gun and lube it up and make it all clean and shiny for the new season, because that's a good idea for those. They need sort of preventative maintenance more often, like lubrication more often than a typical airsoft gun in terms of actually like cracking them open, taking them apart. So that's not problematic in any way, just a thing I need to do that I'm, going to lean into. Same with your gas blowback stuff. You need to lube your O-rings and make sure everything's working right, and probably replace a few O-rings just as a standard sort of maintenance thing. For your AEGs, I currently actually don't have an AEG other than the Garand. So the Garand's going to stay put together because I'm keeping it, just going to continue running until it breaks. Hopefully it won't. But I've still got John's FAL to get working, which is probably going to happen in mid-April because I have a week break from school. And that will mean I actually have time to do something with that. Ooh. And, likewise, I've finally figured out what was up with your old rifle and should be able to resolve that. So those are probably my two biggest, gun teching priorities going into the new season.
So if you're an AEG owner, what do you recommend that you do for an airsoft gun? So, for example, just random example, you've got a friend whose name is Phil, who has an AEG, who hasn't really been fired since we went out and range tested your new optic back in November.
Yeah.
So,
November, yeah.
Yeah, so it was in November since I fired my gun. What kind of maintenance should I be thinking about? And I don't mean me specifically, but anyone in my position. What would you recommend that I do with my AEG to make sure that it's shipshape for the season?
So, really, baseline, grab your battery, charge your battery, run a mag through it. If you have access to a chrono, which I know you do, then chronograph it. Make sure that it's not showing more variance than it should be in terms of its FPS. Make sure it's, shooting doesn't sound weird. If that's the case, you're probably fine, right? So I don't tend to crack my AEGs and relube them every season unless I have a particular need to. If you have,
or I guess if it's been a really long while.
Well, sure, yeah. If it's been if it's been a couple of years, totally, right?
Yeah.
I know yours was taken down and relubed last season, so you probably don't need to do that.
How do you know that, I might ask? Oh, no reason.
I have a few reasons to know that. But yeah, so because I know that, I don't feel like there's a huge incentive to do that. But if you haven't taken it down in a couple of years and you know how, there's really no reason not to go in there and, check your O-rings and lube them up and, re-grease the thing. Again, there's no sort of fairy dust in there. Assuming everything's working right in an AEG, it doesn't actually put, it's not going to burn up your grease terribly quickly. It's not going to put a ton of wear and tear. But if you have the knowledge and the skill set, crack it open. Do that. Why not? Right? And if you're like me and you haven't done gun teching in a couple of months, it's also a good way to get your head back into that, right? To sort of refresh those skills with something easy. Because, I know this works. All right, pop. Yeah. Done.
Should I be cleaning my barrel?
Yes. Half regularly.
In a general sense, but I mean specifically also.
It's the same sort of thing, right? So if we're talking about your gun, or really, any AEG that you're pulling off the shelf they haven't used for, we'll say 4 months. Yeah. Crack it, take the barrel out, look at the barrel, shine a light down one end, look in the other end, see if it looks clean or not. If it looks clean, you're probably okay. If you can see scuds from cheap, horrible bio BBs, yes, that happened to us all. Clean that out. If you're going to clean yours specifically, and I guess this is relevant advice for anyone else who has an RHOP, be gentle, right? That RHOP patch can come out while you're cleaning. Do not apply force. You shouldn't need to. Right?
Should I be using any sort of solvent?
Definitely not if you have an RHOP patch in, because it's silicone and most cleaning solvents will melt it. If you're in that sort of lamentable situation that we were in with the, with the actual physical residue from BBs in there, you can clean that out with really some Windex. or if you have rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, you can use that. Both of those will clean it up without leaving any residue in there. Don't mix them. Mixing cleaning solvents is bad. I think, the like worst case scenario I've ever had was a couple of like BBs that were multiple BBs had been lodged into a really high FPS into a barrel by a really high FPS gun, and I had to melt those out with some acetone. But like that's more of a weird, crazy thing that happened than a seasonal maintenance thing. For the most part, just
Yeah.
like a dry bit of tissue on a cleaning rod for airsoft pulled through the gun will remove the majority of whatever's there. You know, but yeah, it's mostly like, okay, so is my battery okay? Charge the battery, plug the battery in, you know, probably dry fire a couple of times just to be like, oh yeah, everything sounds like it's working right. And then yeah, put a mag through it, right? And if you can go outside and put a mag through it and test out your barrel and test out your hop up and get everything dialed in, because you're going to need to do that anyway. For us, we probably want to wait until it's sort of consistently not minus, 5. Like when we get to a day where it's sort of consistently like 8 or 10 degrees
Yeah,
there in like
absolutely.
probably about a month, we can do the same sort of thing. Because for those who don't know, like your hop up rubber and other stuff like that will deal with the cold differently than it will deal with sort of standard operating temperatures, which means if you zero it for the cold, you'll have to re-zero it for warmer weather. Not a huge problem, but a thing to be aware of. So like, I know, for example, that we're not going to play in March. It's just
exactly.
practically speaking, like, none of us wants to bang our face off of the ground quite that desperately. So we'll avoid playing while there's still like freezing rain every couple of days. But once we get April in Newfoundland, it's usually sort of like, 5-10 degrees is a normal sort of day for a lot of it. So we'll be able to go and zero our gear and get it all sorted in that sense. If you happen to have an indoor facility where you can zero your airsoft rifle, 1, I'm envious. 2, great, do that. But it's mostly making sure everything is working the way it should be. AEGs that are built properly don't require a ton of preventative maintenance other than being built properly. Although, again, if you've used it for 2 years or a year and you've put like 20,000 rounds through it, all right, sure, take it apart, change the grease out. It won't hurt.
Yeah.
Really the biggest thing our build gets out of having that done, and we do try to do it, once a season, give or take, is relubricating the O-rings in the piston, just because we're picky about our air seal being as nice as we can get it. But again, if you don't have the skills to take down your airsoft gun, in like the sense that you don't want to take apart the mech box, check your barrel, make sure it's clean. Pull your barrel out to take a look at your hop up rubber, make sure your hop up rubber is not visibly worn. They do wear out. They wear out more quickly than you're expecting often, and that's easy, right? Like it's literally a visual check, and they're a $5 part, so
Yeah.
worth the cost of replacement usually. Even if you're me and you're crazy and you're using a $15 one, still whatever.
And another easy one too, just as a side note, is checking the batteries in any of your accessories, like your optics or your lights or anything like that, for corrosion. That's something that can happen if the battery's been in there for a really long time. Like I know, for example, in my SRS replica, it just runs off a AA battery, which is so convenient. But sometimes if the battery's been in there a little while, you can start to see that some corrosion build up. So if that's the case, you haul the battery out, you dispose of it, because of course you don't want to keep using it, and then you just clean the leads up with again some isopropyl alcohol or rubbing alcohol or whatever, just to make sure that you get rid of that corrosion, and then put a fresh battery in, and you're good. I haven't had that happen a whole lot, but it does happen, especially with those like button cell batteries that you get in different types of sites. Like those actually can last a very long time, assuming you don't forget and leave your dot on for like hours and hours and hours between games or whatever. If you're diligent about turning them on and off when you're not using them, they can last a very, very long time. So it's very easy for you to have batteries in there for year over year. You want to make sure that they're still in good shape, right?
And I would push that probably a line further, to be honest with you. This is more paranoia than like practical thinking, to be clear. But pull them. Like, there's really no reason. If you're doing what we've just done and sort of setting your gear aside for a season, like winter, right? 4 months. Take the batteries out, put them in a little plastic bag. They're not going to corrode any quicker in there, and they aren't inside of your optics, risking damaging pieces of your kit, right? And it's one of those things, like, I wouldn't bother doing it when I'm using the kit regularly. I check regularly, but I wouldn't bother taking them out. But I, basically when I'm getting my guns ready for hibernation, I usually pull the batteries. I didn't pull the battery in my magnified optic because I've been playing with it off and on all winter. Mm-hmm. So on the upside, I'm quite sure the battery hasn't been in there long enough to cause me problems, and I'm also quite sure it hasn't died because I've been using it for ready ups and trying to become accustomed to handling it and manipulating the magnification stuff on the fly. So
definitely
a non-issue there. But like anything, I got the 249 currently has my red dot on it. My red dot doesn't have a battery in it because it shouldn't, right? It's just been on a shelf for 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Like, I'd never pull the batteries out of my sights, but that's also because I'm consistently pulling. Well, when I had a pegboard, I would consistently pull the rifle off the pegboard. Now it's just in a bag because new house. But same sort of deal. Like, I'll pick it up, I'll do my ready ups and stuff regularly, so it's getting turned on and off. But still, and to be clear, like, just because you're using it doesn't mean the battery can't corrode anyway. So it's still worth checking if the battery's in there.
I just have more confidence that I'll notice if I'm handling it regularly.
For sure, and like you were saying, like, if it's been in storage for a really long time, or it's going to be going in storage for a while. Same thing with like your LiPo batteries. Like, most smart chargers have like a storage mode. Like, if you're going to be storing your batteries and not utilizing them for many, many, many months at a time, then you should be utilizing those features, right?
Yeah. And it's not difficult to do is the other key thing, right?
Yeah.
Smart chargers aren't crazily expensive. If you're running a LiPo in your gun, get one. We've already said that a bunch of times, but there's, it's worth repeating. Make sure your smart charger still works, right? If you're buying a cheap one, which I have, it could die on you. Mine hasn't yet. It's fine. It's not really a thing I'm concerned about, but like, if I don't need it for 3 months, I don't plug it in for 3 months. So yeah, okay. Plug it in, turn it on, right? Make sure the battery on your radio is still good. Anything like that is at risk. Check your BBs, see how many BBs you have. We did an order towards the end of the season, so we're pretty good for season start, I think. If you have open bio BBs, though, check and make sure that they're still good, because you do not want to use expired bio BBs. If they have begun to break down, you will not get much by way of accuracy out of them, and you will goo up your barrel something fierce.
Yeah, absolutely. And, unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing that you might be able to tell visually. You may need a caliper to measure the size of the BB to make sure that it's still, under 6 millimeters, which is kind of important if you're going to be shooting it through a 6 millimeter diameter barrel. The BB should be smaller than that. Otherwise, it's not going to exit. So, if you have, calipers are not very expensive. You can get one at a hardware store for like a couple bucks. And if you're really concerned, like I picked up a set just because they're dead handy.
For sure.
But yeah, like, if you've got, like, I know I have a bag of not expired, I should say. I've got an open bag of bio BBs, and they're still fine, but in a couple months, who knows, right?
And
not that they're hopefully going to last that long.
If you've done any upgrading to any of your guns, you've also probably got a spare like brass 6 millimeter barrel that you don't care about too much. So if you do and you don't own a caliper, just toss a couple of BBs down it. If they roll out the other end, they're fine. Likewise, if you can like squeeze it roll it between your fingers and it doesn't leave like chalky residue on your hands, again, you're probably good.
And you might think, well, this is all fine and good, guys, but I've been playing, airsoft all winter and all this kind of stuff. Fair enough.
Well, then I'm envious.
But I think, too, at this time of year, you're also going to see more bigger events starting up, right? You're going to see more Milsim or Milsim Light or Milsim adjacent games, objective games, etc., than you had before, just because there are more people playing, especially even if you live in the United States or in other places of the world where you don't have much of a winter. If you still have some of a winter, you have fewer people coming out because it's colder, conditions aren't as good, and so on. I know that on the Discord, people have been talking about their local fields and saying, oh, well, turnout wasn't really great for the winter games, etc. But now it's getting warmer, people are coming back out. Great. So again, this is a good opportunity for when it's, quote unquote gonna matter, when you're gonna have games where you have a bit more skin in the game, where you really want to win or whatever. Like, this is a good time for you to start evaluating where you're at.
Cue David
And
Attenborough, the airsofters return from their winter hibernation.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's a good time to examine sort of where you're at and see if there's any improvements or any changes or corrections that you need to make before some of those bigger games start hitting, right?
And certainly,
it's
if you are going to like a game where you're, traveling and paying money, that's a situation where I absolutely would take the gun down, make sure everything's lubed, make sure everything's clean, make sure everything's working exactly how you want it to be, put it back together if you have those skills. And if you don't, honestly, if you're going to like Milsim West or something, you're going to be playing for a couple of days straight, you're paying a lot of money to do it. A gun tech shouldn't charge you a ton of money to just take your gun apart, make sure everything's right and tight, and put it back together. So
yeah, it's definitely worth the investment. Like, I mean, you're already paying several $100s to participate in an event like that. Travel and everything, accommodations notwithstanding, like it can get very expensive. It's part of the reason that we haven't done it, because traveling from Newfoundland especially is extremely expensive. So you can be sure that if we were going to invest that kind of money, we would be, getting someone to check over our guns. Like, it's a small price to pay to make sure that you have something that works. And as we talked about as well on the podcast before with Sam, like when he went to a milsim, or Chaz when he went to a milsim, although Chaz is an exception because he's got like 1 million guns or access to 1 million guns, but like you should be going with more than one rifle, right? And so if you're looking at your kit at the start of the season going like, oh, I want to do all these milsims, and you only have one primary rifle, maybe now's the time to start thinking about, okay, well, I need a backup. Yep. Right? And when you have those conversations with yourself, it's important to consider, or I should say, it's important to balance what is actually a backup gun versus what is a neat kind of toy that you have that's also another airsoft gun. And I'll give you an example. Pat has an HPA, which is essentially a STANAG like M4 mag kind of stuff. And as a second gun, he has his Garand, but I don't consider his Garand a backup gun, because if his M27 goes down, he can't use the mags from his M27 in his Garand. Like, it's a completely separate platform, right? So if you really want to have a backup gun, you should have, in my opinion, you should have two guns that run off sort of the same sort of feeding system.
100%. Right? My Garand is my backup gun, in the sense that if my primary is down for some reason, I will just play happily enough with the Garand.
Yeah.
One of my, impending purchases, literally, the guy I'm buying it from is back in town in 2 weeks, I think, is a second STANAG, another 416 platform, actually, a 416 Delta, which I'm grabbing partly because it will give me a better option for a stock for both rifles, because the stock for the M27 is enormous and leaves much to be desired. But it also just means that I have an AEG that takes STANAG mags. I'm probably going to go in and rebuild the guts of it and make it work like our guns generally do, because I enjoy that, and there's really no reason not to. I have all the parts, so that'll be to the good. But that is going to be my backup / alternate, and that's a very intentional and like thoroughly thought out approach. I don't need to be relying on the 249 or the Garand or the Thompson as practical tools if we're trying to play like a milsim game and we're sort of, for want of a better way to put it, taking it more seriously. I don't expect to have problems with my M27, but having another option that works well is pretty critical in my view. So
I agree. And like, there's lots of people who will say, well, I've got an M4 as my primary and AK as my backup. And in that case, that's fine. But like in most cases, you're going to be having to carry two sets of gear in that case, right?
And I mean, like,
your M4 mags, your AK mags, you might have an M4 rig. Maybe you need an AK rig, right, to carry for as load bearing equipment. Or maybe you have one rig that you can swap out the placard and you're really fancy or whatever. Cool, whatever. But like, you still have to manage those two kinds of feeding sources for your airsoft rifle.
And if you're doing like a big milsim event,
maybe if you have unlimited space, but like, Not for me, like, especially if you're traveling.
Well, and if you're doing a big milsim event, you also want to be like, okay, so, often, not always, but often they have like a NATO team and a
Oh, true.
non-NATO team. So like your backup gun being an AK could be a issue in terms of the rules of the game you're playing in, right? It's not going to be a problem for me. Like, there's no game this summer where like if my primary goes down and I switch to the Grand, other than it being less efficient, anyone's going to be particularly perturbed.
Yeah.
But if you're traveling, yeah, definitely a thing to think about. And, again, like we're talking sort of, I think, in the terms of going to something where you're spending a bunch of money, probably budgeting for like a $200 Metal King Arms stock gun is not a bad idea, right? Because you can toss it in a double gun bag. It ups your carried weight negligibly when you're talking about airsoft kit. You can plug a battery into it and run it. And like, yeah, it's not going to be as good as your primary if you've upgraded the hell out of your primary. But as Phil and I can both attest from years of experience, when your primary goes down, having a gun that you like, that you can pull out and just run without issues, even if it's not as tuned as the primary rifle that you would use, right? Even if it's not your preference, and still have fun, is vastly better than, my gun's dead. I guess I'm useless for the rest of this game and or going home. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's funny actually, talking just for that second about packing, I have remembered one of the things that's really high on my list of stuff to replace and fix in terms of my my airsoft gear, which is that my double gun bag is pretty old. It doesn't actually fit my current selection of rifles very well. It's really not great for carrying the 249. It's not great for carrying the M27. It was bought to carry a sort of standard M4 length rifle, which neither of those is. It especially doesn't like carrying the Garand. I've got a guitar case that one of my friends gave me, like a soft shell guitar case that one of my friends gave me for free, that the M27 currently inhabits on the way to games. And I think, looking at options, it's probably going to run me like $100 to $200 to get another good soft shell that'll actually fit all of my gear. But it's probably money well spent. I may actually keep the current double case and just use it to carry the Thompson and the new Shorty 416 to games, because just having more options in the car is a really useful idea if stuff breaks. And stuff always breaks, right? Like, inevitably there's going to be a game this summer where like one of my guns or one of my teammates' guns shits the bed, and being able to be like, oh, I've got a Thompson with 8 mags in the car. Is it optimal? No, definitely not, right? Like relative to like John's M4, for argument's sake. But it's way better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And certainly...
But you're totally right, though. That gun bag has seen better days, though.
I mean, I don't feel like it owes me anything. I think I paid $80 for it like 15 years ago.
It's definitely holding on with like a hope and a prayer.
But
like, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, it's a great example of that $2 zipper problem that I was mentioning earlier, where it's like, yeah. I think the next time I unzip this, I'm actually just going to yank the, entire assembly of zipper out of part of it.
I think there's a very high likelihood that's true. I've been in the presence of that gun bag a lot, guys, as well, and like I can definitely vouch for this. Like it's basically one thread away from falling apart.
But like, so I'll toss that on my shopping list. If you're like me, this is definitely. I don't know. I think of it as a good idea, but it may just be the fact that I'm completely crazy. I maintain a spreadsheet of like stuff I'm planning on buying in the next 6 months for hobbies, partly because I have too many and it keeps me out of trouble, relatively speaking. But so I will probably update my spreadsheet of things to buy for the season for airsoft after this with like, new socks, new gun bag. I think I actually need batteries. I think I'm down to 1 LiPo. Which isn't really an issue when you're running HBA as your primary, but still probably good to have more than one.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, again, not a big deal. I'll probably post to one of our group chats and the guys will go, oh yeah, I need one too. Because that's how that goes every year. It's just like, oh yeah, exactly. I left one of those in a sock for 6 months. Shit. Sort of things. you know.
And it's hard. Like it's expensive to get them here in Newfoundland as well because it has to come by ground because you can't ship them by air.
For some
But
strange reason.
it's yeah, but it's I mean it's definitely money well spent. Like last time I ordered a battery, I think I ordered three, and like just like any people, we've talked about it before, but like batteries are consumables, right? So after a while, like you're not getting the performance, your lipo's puffing up, it doesn't fit in your buffer tube or whatever. That's the time you need to get rid of it and get a new one. So I think for you, Pat, in particular, I don't remember the last time you picked up a lipo, so it definitely seems like
Yeah.
the
I
right
don't know
time.
if I actually did get one last year because I was like, I'm doing HPA stuff, whatever. So, like it's going to be a pull out all the batteries, see how they are. I think, like I said, I'm pretty sure I have one that needs to be disposed of and one that's fine. When it's like, all right, well, go to the dump, dispose of that one safely and properly because they have a battery disposal there.
Yeah.
Cool, not a problem. But that does need to happen, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about, and kind of the reason we're really rattling through this with you guys is like, some of this is stuff that even though I've been unpacking my kit and poking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I should do that, and hopefully this is useful to you guys in the sense that, you'll get some ideas about how to do this if you've never really unpacked your kit and looked it over before a season with intent, and partly just, because it'll help you be like, oh yeah, I do need new socks, right? Like, that one sock that I wear to airsoft every game currently has more hole than toe in it.
And in particular for socks, guys, I'm one of the things that I really love in this life is socks. As an adult, I remember like getting socks for Christmas when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, socks. But as an adult, I'm like, I love socks. I find they're just having a good pair of socks is so comfortable. And I've really gotten into both Smartwool socks and Darn Tough socks, both of which have tremendous warranties. We're not a sponsor. I'm pretty sure they have no idea who I am. However, they make an excellent product. And if you're really looking to take care of your feet and getting an item that is going to be able to suit your needs, especially when it comes to hiking and airsoft, which really when you think about sort of airsoft and the way that we play, it's a lot of it is hiking. It's the same sort of demands on your feet. They make fantastic products. So if you're looking for something, that's an investment. And I think they're a lifetime warranty on them. So if you get a hole in them, then you just send them back to socks and get a new pair. Like it's just totally worth your money. So would highly, highly recommend you look into that.
Yep, I'm a longtime user of Smartwool socks. I find them super comfortable. They're, a little bit expensive. I it's weird to say this, but yeah, I'm right there with Phil. Like I had the realization a couple of years ago that I was an adult because I was excited when my sister gave me really like cool, comfy socks for Christmas,
Yeah.
which she now does every year because she's awesome. But like, my I have like knee-high socks for sword fighting because historical sword fighting is dorky like that, with various silly things on them. They're not super useful for airsoft. They're a sock to go in a sneaker for sword fighting. They're not a sock to go in a boot for tromping around in the woods. I definitely need to buy some more Smartwool socks, right? I actually think my airsoft socks, which I definitely need to replace, are like 5 or 6 years old. I think Carew bought them for me, like when he was working at a sporting goods store,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
which was not lately.
No, that was a while
So I was
ago.
like, we should perhaps do something about this. But that tells you a lot about like their longevity versus, being used once a week for half of the year.
Yeah, and you've reached peak adulthood when you look at a pair of socks and you're like, oh, $30 seems reasonable for a pair of socks. Like that's the point that of my life that I'm at, where I'm looking at a pair of like Smartwool socks. Again, like when we were at the store the other day looking for hiking boots for my wife and looking at socks as well. And it's like this pair of socks is $27. Like, yeah, that's reasonable. That's how you know you're an adult because you're willing to spend that much money on like a good quality pair of socks. But anyway, that's
I know it's that
I
that's the
I
like
digressed big time.
that's
But
the I'm no longer buying my socks in packs of 30 at Canadian Tire. Right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
ooh.
But guys, all joking about the socks aside, hopefully this is giving you some things to think about when you're looking at your kit for the upcoming season. We'd love to hear more about sort of what do you look for let me say that again. We'd love to hear more about what do you do to prep for the upcoming season. What are the things you look for? What are the things that you're looking forward to replacing or upgrading this year? You can let us know in the comments or join the Discord. Jump in the conversation. We'd love to hear more about the types of things that you're going to be rocking for the upcoming season. But until then, that's all we really got for you. Thanks so much for listening.
We're going to create a new thread.
And we'll see you next week.
We're going to create a new channel on the Discord for just like airsoft socks that have been destroyed by use.
Good idea.
But yeah, no, thanks guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.